What did it mean to grow old between the years 500 C and 1500 C? Did everyone revere their elders, or were some simply left to fend for themselves? Were the wise always listened to, or did physical decline mean a loss of power? Number 7. The venerated elder, a source of wisdom and counsel. Across the sprawling landscapes of medieval Europe and the Islamic world, the image of the aged person often carried a heavy weight of respect, a silent testament to wisdom earned through years. In many societies, the very act of surviving into old age was seen as a sign of divine favor, a clear indication of a life lived well, or at least with enough shrewdness to navigate a world full of dangers. This respect was not merely symbolic. It translated into tangible authority and influence. Take, for instance, the Anglo-Saxon world. Here, the wisdom of elders was a bedrock of community life. Councils of the Witan, or wise men, often included venerable figures whose extensive experience in legal matters, tribal customs, and war strategies was invaluable. These men, frequently older than their peers, were sought out for their counsel before major decisions were made, from land disputes to declarations of war. The Old English epic poem Beowulf, for example, chances King Hrothgar, an aged ruler whose long reign and accumulated knowledge are central to his authority. While he struggles with the monstrous Grendel, his wisdom in counsel and his understanding of ancient lore are never questioned. The poet describes him as a wise old man whose words carry weight. Further south, in the Byzantine Empire, the concept of Gerousia referred to a council of elders or a senate, particularly in the later Roman traditions that carried over into Byzantium. These bodies were often composed of older, experienced statesmen, military leaders, and religious figures. Their age was synonymous with prudence and deep understanding of the intricate workings of the empire's administration and its theological complexities. Chronicles from Constantinople frequently highlighted the sagacity of elder patriarchs and advisors whose long careers provided continuity and stability in a sometimes turbulent political landscape. A legal text like the Ecloga, an 8th century Byzantine law code, often implicitly valorized experience in legal judgments, a quality naturally associated with older jurists. In the Islamic Golden Age, reverence for elders was deeply embedded within society, drawing from both pre-Islamic Arabian traditions and Quranic teachings. The Arabic term sheikh, meaning old man or elder, was often used as a title of respect for a learned scholar, a tribal leader, or a spiritual guide. These shayukh were regarded as repositories of knowledge, not just religious or academic, but also practical and ethical. They were the ones who could recite genealogies, interpret intricate legal matters, or provide guidance on moral dilemmas. For example, the great scholar and physician Avicenna, though not exclusively an old man for all his prolific life, gained immense authority through his vast learning and experience which deepened with age. His medical texts and philosophical treatises were revered, and his later years saw him advising rulers and shaping intellectual discourse. Stories from figures like Al-Ghazali, another towering Islamic scholar, reveal how students would flock to masters who had accumulated decades of learning and spiritual practice, seeing their age as a testament to their profound insights. The very structure of learning, centered around direct transmission from master to student, inherently valued the continuity of knowledge through generations of scholars. Among the Franks and in the Holy Roman Empire, the idea of the ancient custom held immense power. Who better to remember these customs than the oldest members of the community? Village elders and heads of families often presided over local courts, known as thing or moot assemblies, where disputes were settled according to established traditions. Their memory of previous rulings and historical precedents was a living law book. The Saxenspiegel, a 13th century German law book, detailed customs and legal practices, many of which had been passed down orally and preserved by the oldest members of a community before being codified. When a new dispute arose, an appeal to the memory of the oldest and best was a common way to establish justice. In the monastic communities, whether Benedictine, Cistercian, or Cluniac, age often brought with it a profound spiritual authority. The abbot or abbess, though not always the oldest member, was frequently an elder monk or nun chosen for their long years of devotion, wisdom, and administrative experience. Senior monks, known as seniores, were seen as spiritual guides and mentored to younger novices. Their accumulated wisdom from decades of prayer, contemplation, and study of sacred texts made them indispensable. The rule of Saint Benedict, which guided countless monastic orders, emphasized respect for elders within the community, seeing their age as a sign of spiritual maturity and discipline. An infirmary in a monastery, while caring for the sick, also acknowledged the needs of the aged. But these elders were often still seen as figures of quiet spiritual strength, their long lives of devotion a testament to their faith. Even in regions like Scandinavia, known for their fierce warrior culture, wisdom was a revered quality that often came with age. The Jarl's saga, an Icelandic saga from the 13th century, features Jarl Thorgeirsson, an old man renowned for his legal acumen and foresight. Despite his physical frailty, his counsel is sought by powerful chieftains and warriors alike. His words carry more weight than any sword, illustrating a profound respect for intellectual and experiential wisdom over mere physical strength. He is a lawsayer, whose deep understanding of ancient laws and customs makes him an indispensable figure in the saga's dramatic events. The reverence for elders was not a universal constant, but it was a pervasive and powerful theme across many medieval societies. This respect flowed from the understanding that age brought experience, memory, and a quiet authority that was essential for the functioning of communities, families, and even empires. The aged were often the living archives, the moral compasses, and the spiritual anchors of their world. Number 6. The frail figure, a symbol of weakness and dependence. While some elderly individuals held esteemed positions, the reality for many in the medieval period was a stark contrast. The physical decline that often accompanied old age frequently rendered individuals vulnerable, a perception that sometimes tipped into being seen as a burden rather than a blessing. Life expectancy was significantly lower than today, and those who did reach advanced years often contended with debilitating conditions without modern medical interventions. Diseases like arthritis, blindness, deafness, and various forms of dementia were rampant. Medical texts from the period, such as those by Reyes or Salerno medical school writings, describe symptoms of aging, often linking them directly to the cooling and drying of the body's humors, leading to weakness and infirmity. These texts, while attempting to understand the process, offered little in the way of effective cures for age-related ailments. A 12th century text from the school of Salerno, the Regimen Sanitatis Salernitanum, offered advice for maintaining health, but implicitly acknowledged the inevitable decline associated with advanced years, focusing more on managing symptoms than reversing the aging process. In rural communities, where physical labor was the backbone of survival, the inability to work effectively could quickly turn an elder into a dependent. A farmer no longer able to plow his fields or tend his livestock, or a craftsperson whose hands trembled too much to weave or forge, risked losing their livelihood and consequently their independent status. Land tenure systems, like feudalism, often tied sustenance to active labor or military service. If an elderly vassal could no longer fulfill his duties to his lord, his land might be reassigned, potentially leaving him and his family without support. The Domesday Book, commissioned in 1085 by William the Conqueror, documented landholdings and capacities. And while it does not explicitly discuss elderly dependency, it paints a picture of a society where economic productivity was paramount. Those unable to contribute economically faced precarious situations. Poverty was a constant shadow, and old age frequently exacerbated it. Many elderly poor individuals relied on charity, either from their families, the church, or local almsgivers. Monasteries and hospitals, often run by religious orders, did provide care for the sick and poor, including the aged. For instance, the Hotel Dieu in Paris, founded in the 7th century, and similar institutions across Europe, offered lodging, food, and basic care. However, space was limited and the conditions could be harsh. These institutions were a last resort for many, highlighting a dependency that could strip individuals of their dignity. The records of charitable foundations often indicate a significant proportion of their beneficiaries were aged and infirm. In some legal codes, the infirmity of old age could even affect an individual's legal standing. For example, a person deemed too old and feeble might be relieved of certain responsibilities, but this also meant a loss of autonomy. They might be placed under the guardianship of a younger family member, who would then manage their property and affairs. While this could be a protective measure, it also reflected a societal view of the aged as less capable of self-governance. The late medieval Venetian Republic, for instance, had laws regarding the appointment of guardians for those unable to manage their own affairs, a category that often included the very old, who were experiencing severe physical or mental decline. The physical decay associated with old age was also reflected in artistic and literary representations. The dance of death motif, prevalent from the 14th century onwards, depicted skeletons leading people of all ages to their demise. While it emphasized the universality of death, the aged figures were often portrayed as already frail, their bodies stooped, their skin wrinkled, highlighting the physical toll of life and the approach of the grave. These images, while cautionary, did not shy away from showing the physical ravages of time. Family structures, while often providing a safety net, were not always sufficient. In large multi-generational households common in rural areas, the elderly might continue to live with their children and grandchildren, contributing in what ways they could, perhaps through childcare or light chores. However, if resources were scarce, or if the family faced hardship, the elderly could become an additional mouth to feed, a source of stress rather than support. Historical records and folk tales occasionally hint at the difficult choices families faced, sometimes leading to the abandonment or neglect of the very old and infirm in times of famine or severe economic distress. Though such instances were likely exceptions to the generally held familial obligations. The vulnerability of the aged was a constant concern, often intertwined with their economic contribution and physical capacity. While respect might be a theoretical ideal, the harsh realities of medieval life meant that many elderly individuals found themselves in positions of dependence, their bodies betraying them, and their communities sometimes struggling to provide adequate support. This was not a universal experience, but it was a significant aspect of old age in a world without extensive social welfare systems or advanced medical care. Number 5. The spiritual ascetic, a path to piety and redemption. For many medieval individuals, particularly as they advanced in years, the focus shifted dramatically towards spiritual matters. Old age was often seen as a final crucial opportunity to prepare for death, to atone for past sins, and to cultivate a deep relationship with God. This perspective was deeply rooted in Christian theology, which emphasized the fleeting nature of earthly life and the eternal consequence of one's spiritual state. One common manifestation of this view was the increasing piety of the aged. Many individuals, after a lifetime of worldly pursuits, would turn more fervently to prayer, fasting, and acts of charity as they neared the end of their lives. Chronicles and wills from the period frequently document how wealthy individuals, upon reaching old age or facing a terminal illness, would make significant donations to churches, monasteries, and hospitals, often requesting prayers for their souls in return. They might commission elaborate burial sites, establish perpetual masses, or endow chantries where priests would pray for them long after their death. A will from a French nobleman in the 14th century, for example, might specify a substantial gift to a local abbey for the health of my soul and the souls of my ancestors, reflecting a desire to secure spiritual merit as time grew short. Entering a monastic order in old age was another significant path for spiritual preparation. While many joined religious life in their youth, it was not uncommon for widows, widowers, or even those who had led secular lives to seek refuge and spiritual focus in a monastery or convent late in life. These individuals, often called converts or oblates, would dedicate their remaining years to prayer, contemplation, and service within the monastic community. For women especially, convents offered a structured environment where they could live out their final years in devotion, often with a sense of security and community. The proliferation of women's religious houses across Europe, from the Anglo-Saxon double monasteries to the later Beguine communities, provided options for older women seeking a spiritual end to their lives. Pilgrimage also became a significant spiritual undertaking for the elderly. Despite the physical hardships involved, many old men and women embarked on long journeys to holy sites like Jerusalem, Rome, or Santiago de Compostela. They believed that such arduous acts of devotion would earn them blessings, indulgences, or divine favor, cleansing them of sins before they faced divine judgment. Accounts from travelers like Marjorie Campe, a 15th century English mystic, describe her own journeys often undertaken in her later years, enduring physical challenges driven by intense spiritual fervor. The very difficulty of the journey, combined with the participants' advanced age, enhanced the spiritual merit gained. The concept of memento mori, remember that you must die, was a pervasive theme in medieval culture, and it resonated particularly strongly with the aged. Artworks, literature, and sermons constantly reminded people of the transience of life and the inevitability of death. For the elderly, this was not merely a philosophical concept, but a present reality. They were seen as being closer to the divine realm, having lived a full life, and now standing on the threshold of eternity. This proximity to death often led to a heightened sense of introspection and religious observance. Sermons from the time frequently urged the old to prepare their souls to reconcile with others and to make their confessions, portraying old age as a crucial time for spiritual reckoning. Hermits and anchorites, individuals who chose to live in solitude and extreme asceticism, were often older. Their decision to withdraw from the world was frequently born of a long life lived in contemplation, seeking an unmediated connection with God. These solitary figures, though physically isolated, were often revered by the wider community as living saints or holy people. Their age and severe self-denial seen as powerful signs of spiritual attainment. Their wisdom and perceived closeness to God led people to seek their counsel, bridging the gap between their isolated spiritual existence and the needs of the common folk. For the medieval mind, the physical decline of the body in old age was not just a medical reality. It was also a potent spiritual symbol. The weakening flesh served as a reminder of humanity's fallen state and the perishable nature of earthly existence, compelling the aged to focus on the eternal soul. This spiritual framing of old age provided a profound sense of purpose and meaning, transforming what might otherwise be seen as a period of decline into a time of intense preparation for ultimate salvation. This perspective often imbued the aged with a different kind of respect, one rooted not in worldly power but in spiritual gravitas and proximity to the divine. Number 4. The skilled hand, continuing economic contribution. Despite the challenges of physical decline, many elderly individuals in the medieval period continued to play vital economic roles, their contributions often valued for their experience, accumulated skills, and specialized knowledge. Old age did not automatically mean retirement in a formal sense. Rather, it often meant a shift in the nature of one's work. In agricultural societies, which constituted the vast majority of medieval Europe, older farmers, while perhaps no longer capable of the heaviest labor like plowing or harvesting vast fields, still contributed significantly. Their intimate knowledge of the land, local weather patterns, seed varieties, and animal husbandry practices was invaluable. They might oversee younger laborers, advise on crop rotation, or manage livestock. A long-time farmer knew which fields yielded best, which signs predicted a harsh winter, and how to treat common animal ailments. This accumulated wisdom was often passed down orally, generation to generation, with the eldest as the primary repository of this critical information. Records of manorial life, such as those found in surveys of English estates, sometimes mention elderly tenants who, though listed as less productive in terms of raw labor, still held their tenancies and played a role in advising the younger generation. In urban centers, skilled artisans and craftspeople often continued their trades well into old age. A master carpenter, weaver, blacksmith, or goldsmith would have spent decades honing their craft, developing specialized techniques that younger apprentices and journeymen were eager to learn. Their hands, though perhaps less nimble, possessed a precision and understanding gained through long practice. Guilds, which regulated trades in towns, often revered their elder masters. These senior members frequently held positions of authority within the guild, setting standards, adjudicating disputes, and training the next generation. They might shift from hands-on production to more supervisory roles, quality control, or pattern design, relying on their vast experience. A master painter, for example, might design the complex scenes for an altarpiece, leaving the more physically demanding work of grinding pigments or applying base coats to his younger assistants, while still overseeing every detail. Guild statutes from cities like Paris, London, or Florence often outlined the progression from apprentice to journeyman to master, implying a long career path where experience and skill culminated in the highest levels of mastery. Women, too, maintained crucial economic roles. Older women often served as midwives, healers, or educators. Their knowledge of herbal remedies, childbirth practices, and childcare was gained through decades of experience and was indispensable to their communities. A village midwife, often an older woman, possessed a lifetime of practical wisdom concerning pregnancies, births, and infant care, making her a central and respected figure. Beyond these specialized roles, older women continued to manage households, prepare food, spin yarn, and mend clothes, sustaining the domestic economy. In prosperous households, elderly matriarchs often managed the entire household, overseeing servants, budgeting resources, and ensuring the smooth running of the family's daily life. A role that required immense experience and organization skill. Even in religious institutions, older members often maintain productive roles. Elder monks might become scribes, copying manuscripts with painstaking detail, or illuminators applying their artistic skill to sacred texts. Older nuns might be responsible for managing the convent's finances, educating younger novices, or acting as infirmarians applying their learned knowledge of natural remedies. Their long years of dedication and experience within the monastic framework made them invaluable contributors to the daily life and spiritual mission of their communities. The scriptoria of monasteries, like those at St. Gall or Monte Cassino, would have seen older monks, their eyesight perhaps dim, but their hands steady with years of practice, painstakingly creating the books that preserved knowledge. An older merchant had built up a network of contacts, understood the complexities of trade routes, market fluctuations, and commercial law. While younger men might undertake the arduous journeys, the elder merchant often managed the financial end, negotiated deals, and directed the overall strategy of the family business. Their reputation for honesty and shrewdness built over decades was a powerful asset. The Hanseatic League, a powerful confederation of merchant guilds and market towns in northern Europe, often saw its most influential members as experienced, older individuals who had navigated the intricate world of international trade for many years. These examples illustrate that old age, while bringing physical challenges, did not automatically sideline individuals from economic life. Instead, it often transformed their contributions, allowing them to leverage their accumulated wisdom, specialized skills, and vast experience. Their continued presence in the economy underscored a societal value placed on long-term expertise and the intergenerational transfer of knowledge and craft. Number 3. The patriarch, matriarch. Holders of family and community power. In the intricate social structures of the medieval world, the elderly frequently held significant power within their families and communities, often embodying the roles of patriarchs and matriarchs. This authority stemmed from a combination of accumulated wealth, control over resources, and their position as heads of multi-generational households. In many societies, land was the primary source of wealth and power. Ownership and inheritance patterns often ensured that the eldest male, the patriarch, retained control of family lands and assets until his death. This meant that younger generations, even adult sons and daughters, remained economically dependent on their parents, particularly their father. This system reinforced the father's authority as he held the purse strings and determined the future inheritance. A son might work the land for decades, but the ultimate decision-making power regarding its sale, lease, or division rested with father. Legal codes like the Salic law among the Franks or later feudal customs explicitly outlined male primogeniture, where the eldest son inherited but the father retained authority until his demise. This control over property ensured that the patriarch's decisions regarding marriages, careers, and financial investments for his children and grandchildren carried immense weight. Similarly, older women, or matriarchs, particularly widows, could wield considerable influence. A widow, especially if she inherited her husband's property or was left with significant dower rights, could become the head of the household. She might manage estates, oversee servants, and arrange marriages for her children. Some powerful noblewomen, like Eleanor of Aquitaine, exercised immense political and economic power well into their later years, managing vast territories and advising their royal sons. Even in less aristocratic settings, an elderly widow who had successfully managed her household for decades commanded respect and authority within her extended family and often in the wider community. Her experience in household management, child-rearing, and local social networks made her an indispensable figure. Beyond economic control, patriarchs and matriarchs often served as the moral and social arbiters of their families. They were the ones who maintained family honor, settled internal disputes, and enforced social norms. Their long experience provided a historical memory for the family, allowing them to recall past grievances or alliances, which was crucial in a society where oral tradition and personal relationships. The head of a powerful clan or family, often the oldest living member, was responsible for upholding its reputation, protecting its members, and ensuring its continuity. This was particularly evident in regions with strong kinship ties, such as Ireland or Scotland, where clan chiefs, often aged and experienced, were powerful figures guiding their people. In communal decision-making, the voice of the elder carried particular weight. In many village assemblies or town councils, older established citizens were often chosen for positions of authority, such as aldermen, bailiffs, or mayors. Their long tenure in the community meant they had a deep understanding of local politics, customs, and the needs of the populace. Their age was seen as a guarantor of prudence and stability. For example, in medieval English boroughs, the ancient and discreet men were often selected for various civic roles, emphasizing their age and wisdom as qualifications. The role of the patriarch extended into legal and religious spheres too. In some contexts, the eldest male in a family or lineage would represent his entire kin group in legal disputes, religious ceremonies, or social gatherings. His voice spoke for all. This was especially true in customary law, where the testimony or declaration of an elder could resolve complex issues. They were the keepers of the family's legacy and its connection to the past. The concept of ancestor worship, or more accurately, deep reverence for ancestral lineage, was also present. While not a religious cult in the modern sense, the honor of one's ancestors embodied by the living elders was critically important. Maintaining the family line, ensuring its prosperity, and upholding its good name were duties passed down through generations, with the patriarch or matriarch at the helm of this continuity. This ancestral connection further solidified the power and respect afforded to the eldest living family members. These powerful roles highlight that old age for many was not a period of retreat but rather a time of consolidated influence. Through their control over property, their social standing, and their accumulated wisdom, patriarchs and matriarchs were central to the functioning of families and communities, holding sway over the lives and futures of younger generations. Number 2, the grim reality, physical decay, and the fear of death. Despite the various positive views of old age, there was an inescapable awareness of its grim realities. The medieval world was acutely conscious of physical decay and the looming presence of death, and these themes were often emphasized through artistic, medical, and theological lenses. Old age was frequently depicted as a time of weakening illness and the inevitable journey towards the grave. Artistic representations of aging often highlighted its less appealing aspects. The dance macabre, or dance of death, was a pervasive motif from the late 14th century onwards, especially after the Black Death. These artworks showed skeletons leading people of all ages and social standings towards death. Elderly figures were often depicted as already withered, bent, and frail, their bodies mirroring the decay they were approaching. Their haggard faces, sagging skin, and stooped postures served as stark reminders of the physical toll of time, emphasizing humanity's fleeting beauty and strength. These depictions were not meant to be flattering, but rather cautionary, urging viewers to prepare their souls for judgment. Medical understanding of aging, though rudimentary by modern standards, largely focused on decline. Medieval physicians, influenced by ancient Greek and Roman theories of humors, believed that old age was characterized by a loss of heat and moisture, leading to a cold and dry temperament. This imbalance was thought to cause weakness, wrinkling, and susceptibility to various ailments. Treatises by figures like Constantine the African, who translated Arabic medical texts into Latin, or later figures like Henri de Mondeville, detailed various illnesses associated with old age, from impaired vision and hearing to chronic aches and pains. While some remedies were proposed, they were mostly palliative, and the underlying assumption was that physical decline was an unavoidable process, leading to debility. The fear of death was a constant undercurrent in medieval life, exacerbated by high mortality rates from disease, famine, and warfare. For the elderly, this fear was often more immediate and palpable. Sermons frequently reminded congregations of their mortality, using the aged as living examples of life's brevity. The concept of memento mori, remember that you must die, was not just an intellectual exercise, but a deeply felt admonition. Coffins, tombs, and religious iconography often incorporated skeletal figures, decaying bodies, or worms to vividly portray the end of earthly existence. For the old, these images were not distant allegories, but reflections of their own approaching fate. Poverty and infirmity, as discussed earlier, often intertwined to create a particularly grim reality for the elderly poor. Without robust family support or charitable aid, old age could mean destitution, hunger, and exposure. The prospect of living out one's final years in such desperate circumstances was a profound fear. Begging was a common sight, and many of those begging were elderly individuals whose bodies could no longer support them through labor. This visible suffering underscored the vulnerability of old age in a harsh economic landscape. Social attitudes, while often valuing wisdom, could also show impatience or even scorn for the physically diminished. Literature and folk tales sometimes featured caricatures of the aged as senile, irritable, or helpless. While not necessarily representative of universal attitudes, these portrayals suggest a darker side to the perception of old age, particularly when it involved a loss of mental acuity or a complete inability to contribute. Such narratives often highlighted the isolation or marginalization that could accompany extreme old age and infirmity. The medieval understanding of hygiene and sanitation also contributed to the grimness of old age. Without proper care for teeth, skin, and basic cleanliness, the physical signs of aging could be exaggerated, leading to further discomfort and social isolation. The absence of effective pain management meant that chronic ailments suffered by the elderly were often endured with little relief, adding to the daily burden of physical decay. Even within families, while respect was often preached, the daily demands of caring for an elderly, infirm relative could be immense, especially in large, poor households. The strain could lead to resentment, and the burden of care could feel overwhelming in a world where every pair of hands was needed for survival. The frank and often unvarnished depiction of physical decay and the pervasive fear of death served as a powerful counterpoint to any romanticized notions of old age. For many, growing old was a struggle against the inevitable, a period marked by increasing weakness, pain, and the constant awareness of one's impending mortality. This unflinching perspective was a fundamental part of the medieval understanding of the human life cycle. Number 1. The custodian of tradition. Memory keepers and storytellers. In societies where literacy was not widespread and printing presses were centuries away for much of the period, the elderly played an absolutely crucial role as the living libraries of their communities. They were the memory keepers, the storytellers, and the living repositories of tradition, history, and communal knowledge. Their minds held the narratives that bound a society together, preserved its customs, and transmitted its heritage. The passing down of oral traditions was perhaps the most vital function of the aged. Genealogies, legal precedents, epic poems, folk tales, and religious narratives were all preserved and transmitted through spoken word. An elder could recite the lineage of a ruling family for generations, explain the complex history of a land dispute, or recount the heroic deeds of distant ancestors. In Germanic societies, for example, the skalds or bards, often older men with immense powers of memory, preserved sagas and poetic eddas that told the stories of gods, kings, and heroes. The Icelandic sagas, though written down in the 13th and 14th centuries, are largely based on oral traditions that had been passed down for centuries, largely through the memories of older individuals who could recall these vast, intricate narratives. In legal systems, particularly those based on customary law rather than written statutes, the memory of the aged was indispensable. When disputes arose, whether over land boundaries, inheritance, or social norms, the testimony of the oldest and wisest was often sought. These elders could recall how similar cases had been settled in the past, what the established local customs were, or who truly held rights to a particular piece of property based on generations of ownership. Their collective memory formed a living legal code, ensuring continuity and consistency in local justice. The dooms, laws of Anglo-Saxon kings, for instance, often drew upon existing custom, and these customs were maintained in the collective memory of the community's elders. Beyond formal laws, older individuals were also the custodians of practical knowledge. They knew the best times to plant and harvest, the specific properties of local herbs for healing, the signs that foretold weather changes, or the most effective methods for building a certain type of dwelling or crafting a specific tool. This accumulated knowledge, gained through decades of observation and practice, was essential for the survival and prosperity of families and villages. A master weaver, long retired from the loom, might still possess the intricate patterns for complex textiles, knowledge essential for his community's economic well-being. Religious traditions also relied heavily on the memory of the aged. Older members of a community, especially those who had been religious leaders or simply devout adherents for many decades, would remember the precise rituals for religious festivals, the stories of local saints, or the nuances of theological interpretations that were not always fully codified in written texts. Their understanding of sacred practices often provided a vital link to earlier forms of worship and belief. In monastic settings, older monks or nuns were the ones who truly understood the nuances of liturgical practice, the long history of their order, and the spiritual insights gleaned from decades of contemplation. The role of the storyteller was not merely about entertainment. It was about education and moral instruction. Grandparents, especially grandmothers, often served as primary educators for young children, passing on moral lessons through fables, explaining social roles through stories, and imparting practical skills through shared tasks. These narratives often reinforced community values, taught history, and prepared younger generations for their roles in society. The power of narrative was immense, and the elderly were its primary conduits. In essence, the aged were the living archives of medieval societies. They provided a critical link to the past, preserving cultural identity, legal frameworks, and essential knowledge that would otherwise have been lost. Their ability to recall and transmit these vital traditions solidified their position as respected and indispensable members of their communities, ensuring that the accumulated wisdom of previous generations continued to shape the present.